Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Prabhupada 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 Srila Prabhupada Nitai Gaur Haribo 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai, Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shri Gauranitai ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai, so welcome to this evening's Bhagavad Gita class. We are reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Chapter 3, which is called Karma Yoga, and text 35. So, it's there. Please repeat after me. Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swadharme Nidanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtita Swadharme Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Please chant. Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtita Dharme Nidanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayava. Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtita Swadharme Nidanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtita Swadharme Nidanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Okay, let's do the word-for-word translations here. Shreyan, far better. Swadharmaha, one's prescribed duties. Vigunaha, even faulty. Paradharmat, than duties mentioned for others. Su anushtitat, perfectly done. Swadharme, in one's prescribed duties. Nidhanam, destruction. Shreyaha, better. Paradharmaha, duties prescribed for others. Bhaya avaha, dangerous. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties even though faultily than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. Please repeat. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties. For to follow another's path is dangerous. Purport. One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness, rather than those prescribed for others. Materially, prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical condition, under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna. But whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for his particular situation and should not imitate others. For example, a Brahmin who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmin who follows the principles of non-violence. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmin, or a Brahmana may act as a Kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Vishvamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahmana, whereas Parashuram was a Brahmin, but later on he acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendently situated, they could do so, but as long as one is on the material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Militanjena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpaturubhischa Kripa Sindhuvi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasha Jadesha Tarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right. So there are two verses in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna repeats twice, and this verse is one of them. So in 1847, he says something very similar. In fact, the first two lines of the Sanskrit are exactly the same. So 1847 is Shreyan Swadharma Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtita. And then he says, Swabhava Niyatam Karma Kurvan Napnoti Kilbisham. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. So, and the difference here is this last two lines. He says, destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. So, according to Prabhupada says, our psychophysical condition, in other words, our mentality, right? So our psychological condition is our mentality, and then our physical condition is basically our skill set, right? What we're physically capable of doing. So everyone has a different psychophysical condition, right? Everyone has a slightly different mentality. We all have different bodies and inclinations for certain types of activities. So basically we all have our individual nature. And that's determined by different factors, right? Prabhupada says it's largely determined by how we're influenced by the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Which combination of those three factors is influencing us, that's going to create a certain psychology, certain psychophysical condition. But then it's also it's a combination of nature and nurture, right? So nature means we're born with a particular nature that we've that is accrued from our previous lifetimes, right? So when a child takes birth, they're not a blank slate, right? They're bringing their karma and their consciousness, their mentalities, their desires, and all these things from previous lifetimes. So that creates an initial nature, or the combination of those things. A certain psychology is already there when the child is born or before they're born. And then, depending on the culture, the family, the country that they're born in, then they're going to have a certain style of nurturing from their parents. And that's also individual, the family, depending on how the family trains them and how they raise them and what kinds of personality traits they, fan the spark of, and what personality traits they kind of, suppress in the way they raise the child. Different environmental factors, experiences, impressions, and all that. So everyone ends up with a different nature, and that nature makes us suited to a particular type of work, right? So some people are suited towards work. Krishna breaks it up into 4 different career paths, basically, which he calls varnas. So, in Sanskrit they're Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. In English we can, some of you may know Mother Urmila, and she's written a book called Career Dharma, where she wrote it together with a friend of hers, Rukmini Datta. And it's called Career Dharma, and it's really good. It breaks down the 4 varnas, or 4 general categories of career paths, and the different characteristics of people in those career paths, so that if you read that book, you can understand what your varna is. You can understand what your nature is, what things you value, basically what makes you tick, what makes you happy, And when we understand that, that's the beginning of self-realization, right? Is understanding at least what is our current condition, what is our current psychophysical nature, and how do we apply that in the world in a way that's both materially and spiritually productive, right? That's what we're doing, because we're working with a whole lot of material conditioning, And it would be nice if we were on the transcendental platform and we could just do anything and everything. But unfortunately, most of us aren't, right? We're still materially conditioned. We're still struggling with our senses and the mind and all the qualities that come with having been in the material world since time immemorial. So we need to know how to act from the platform where we are, right? There's no use. We can always aspire to be transcendental, but it's like, if it's like trying to put a 5-year-old in a PhD program or something. It's just not going to work, right? 5-year-old has to go to kindergarten, or what do you call it over here? Reception, and learn, from the beginning. So, and that way they can make steady progress. So like that, we need to figure ourselves out materially first, so that we can know what is our duty. Or what kind of career should we go into so that we can be happy, so that we can benefit ourselves, our families, our society, and make a solid contribution. So so there are 4 fields. So Brahman, the Brahman Varna is, she calls the field of ideas. So that's where you're working with abstract ideas, knowledge. There's an aloofness, a detachment, a search for truth. Basically, the Brahman is concerned with what is true and what is wise. And then the Kshatriyas are the government. It's the field of government. So they get involved in politics, military, administration, police, firefighters, like that. So these are people that are concerned with protecting. They want to... they're concerned about justice, right? The question they ask is it just and is it honorable? It's all about justice, honor, protecting people that are dependent on them, caring for, like that, making sure everyone is taken care of and that there's justice in the world. So that's very important. And they have a particular nature that their nature suits their work. Then the Vaishyas, they operate in the field of resources. That's the field of resources. So Vaishyas are basically they're the producers in society. They're producing all the resources that everyone else uses, all the materials for construction, all the food for the world, all the resources they're generating. So these are, farmers and business people who are producing things. And one of the main things that they produce is wealth, right? So the Vaishyas, they produce wealth through business ventures, through trade, and expanding wealth and providing wealth for everyone. And then the Shudra class is called the field of artistry, because these are the artists, the musicians, all the craftspeople or tradespeople, that carpenters and electricians and plumbers and all that, as well as actors and actresses, or anyone who's even like physical therapists who are like adjusting your muscles, chiropractors who are adjusting your bones, right? They're people who are like fixing machines of any type, mainly like computer scientists who are working with any technical kind of work. That's in the field of artistry. So these different fields have different values, and one who has a nature to do work in one of those fields has a certain sense of ethics and morals that go with that field, and their nature suits them to do the activity in the proper way. So even if they don't do it perfectly, they'll be able to do it with the proper set of values that make the work successful, and that make a satisfying and pleasing contribution to the whole society. So that's what's wanted, right? That you know your nature, and then you do the work according to your nature. But then Krishna says that don't try to do work in a field that's not your varna. Don't try to work in another field, because that's dangerous. He uses the word bhayavaha, which literally means that your work becomes a vehicle of fear. So then somebody might ask, well, why is it dangerous? So Mother Amala goes through some different reasons here, and she gives some nice examples that make this very clear. So she says that when we work according to our nature, then we feel inspired by our work. Right? If you're a job, when you're at your job and you feel like this is what I was made to do, like this is just my thing. I feel really energized by my work. When I'm working, I can get into a flow. I can just lose track of time. I can just totally work through my lunch break without even, noticing it, and work for hours on end, like that. Then that's how you know when you're doing the work that you're supposed to be doing. And when you're doing it, then the mind becomes peaceful, right? Mind becomes your friend, because it's satisfied, it's enlivened, it's focused. And when our career path makes our mind our friend, then that satisfaction and that ability to focus carries over into other aspects of our life, right? Like our family life, our spiritual life, right? When we're doing our sadhana, when we're chanting japa, then we can focus. We can be satisfied with what it is, because we're satisfied in our career, which is where most of us spend most of our time, right? But then when we're working in the wrong field, then everything becomes problematic. Even if we can do the work very well, right? And you might think, well, I have the skills for this. I can do this better than a lot of other people, so maybe I should do that. But when we do it, even if we are good at it, and even if we can perform that work better than we can do the work in our field, it's still problematic, because it's not aligned with our nature. And so our bodies and minds signal to us that it's wrong, right? While we're doing that work, even if we are doing it well, we're going to feel drained. We're just going to feel tired and unsatisfied and frustrated and bored and kind of trapped. The mind will become not so friendly anymore, right? Mind will become the enemy and just keep challenging us, like, why am I doing this? What am I doing out here or in here? Or complaining people don't appreciate me, or just procrastinating, thinking I need a break all the time. So it's very different from the first scenario, where you get so much into a flow, you just work through your lunch break. This person is like working and thinking, oh my God, when is the lunch break? Maybe I just need to step outside and take a little break before lunch, take a mid-morning break, have a snack or something. So this tendency to procrastinate, to complain, to just be tired and frustrated, and it's basically like symptomatic of the mode of ignorance. So when we're doing the wrong kind of work, we get influenced by ignorance and we get dragged down. And it arises from a basic ignorance of who we are and what our nature is and what we're supposed to be doing. So when we're ignorant of what our real nature is and what field we're supposed to be working in, and because of that ignorance we enter into the wrong field of work, then ignorance becomes prominent. And then all the symptoms of the mode of ignorance just take over, right? And that's why, like, procrastination, depression, and frustration, and just being bored and feeling helplessly trapped, or something like that. Those are all kind of symptoms of the mode of ignorance. So then that obviously is going to become dangerous, materially and spiritually. And then that ignorance and frustration and dissatisfaction are going to spill into other things, like our family life and our spiritual life, our sadhana, and we're just going to feel dissatisfied with everything. So that's one of the reasons why working in our field is very important, and it's important to not work in a field that's not our field. So sometimes, especially devotees might think, let me do something that I don't like, let me do something that I just hate doing, because then that's going to make me surrender. I'll be more surrendered to Krishna. Or it'll be good because I won't get attached to my work. I won't get attached to my service. I'll just be able to stay aloof. But that's not what Krishna wants for us, right? That's not what he's saying here. He's saying you have to work according to your nature. You have to do your work, your swadharma. And so another reason is that what happens is, if you don't get pleasure from your work, from the work itself, or from the service you're doing, then you'll want to get pleasure from something else. Right? So I don't enjoy my work, but I earn money. So then the focus just becomes the money. Right? I'm doing this just to get the money. Or I don't like this work, and I'm not, or let's say you're doing a service. I don't like my service, and they're not paying me to do this either, right? This is just voluntary. But I like the recognition that I get. I like when people like praise me because I did the service well. So then while you're doing the service, you're just thinking about, you're just doing it in anticipation of getting the appreciation, the recognition. And so this is actually the opposite of what Krishna wants, right? When he says, karmanyeva dikaraste, ma phaleshu kadachana. He says that it's okay to be attached to your work. That's your right. After all, we have to work and we have a nature. We work according to... It's okay to be attached to your work, but not to the results. You shouldn't be attached to the results of your work. So if we're doing the wrong kind of work, we won't want to do the work. And we won't, get absorbed in our work. We'll just be attached to the results. It's just the opposite of what it should be. We're just attached to the money that we're going to get, the recognition that we're going to get, the social respectability that we're going to get from a particular job that society thinks is great, even though it's just totally not me, and I hate it. So, yeah, that's not what we should be doing. So, not only is working in the wrong field harmful and dangerous for us, but it also has negative consequences for the whole society. So then, in Career Dharma, Mother Urmila gives some examples of that, and she explains why. So she says, for example, if a Brahmin, someone in the field of ideas, is trying to do a Kshatriya's work, is trying to work in the field of government, let's say someone who's a Brahmin becomes, a head of police, or becomes a fireman, or a president of a country or something, then it's not going to work out very well, because Brahmins, their nature is that they're merciful, they're forgiving, and so that merciful, forgiving nature is going to make it difficult for them to enforce laws, to punish criminals, to actually do justice, right? Because the government is supposed to provide justice, a criminal justice system. But if you're just very merciful and very forgiving, then Hare Krishna, it's hard to apply that, it's hard to enforce that. And another thing is that Brahmins, they're very truthful, right? They have this adherence to truth. But if you're in politics, you have to be diplomatic, and sometimes you have to kind of, say things in a roundabout way, whereas Brahmins like to just be very straightforward. And then their straightforward speaking also can damage relationships with, huge groups of people by just saying it like it is. Whereas a Kshatriya is going to know how to kind of like twist and bend the truth to make everybody kind of happy, right? So that things can go on nicely. But a Brahmin has a hard time doing that. And then also, in governance, sometimes you need to make quick decisions. You just need to, there's some situation, right? There's a battle or a dispute, conflict, and things just need to be handled immediately, because otherwise people are in danger and people are going to get hurt or killed or whatever. But Brahmins, because they have this tendency to want to research and think things through and deliberate, then it can take too long for them to make decisions that need to be made. So in that way, if you take a Brahmin and put them in the position of government or Kshatriya job, then it doesn't work out so well because their nature is not suited for that. And also, if you take a Kshatriya and try to get them to do Brahman's work, then that's also problematic because, the Kshatriya is not so concerned with truth. They're more concerned with, smooth governance. So they might bend knowledge for political purposes, right? Like if you think about history textbooks that are written by, basically by government, by the educational system that's, monitored by the government, then you get like a very skewed presentation of history, like we have, right? And then another thing is that Kshatriyas, they're very, hierarchy is very important for them, right? They like to be like, okay, this is the ultimate authority, and then there's department heads, and then there's these and that. And they're really into authority. Whereas in the field of ideas, hierarchy can obstruct the flow of ideas, the generation of knowledge, because somebody low in the pecking order might have a really good idea, like the best idea in the whole institution or whatever, but because they're not an authority, no one's going to listen to them. Whereas in educational circles, it's more like, there's a strong peer culture, like they do peer reviews and all this. So ideas, and there's just an openness. Generally, like Brahmins are very open. They'll just take knowledge from, anyone who has real knowledge. And then Brahmins are also, Kshatriyas are also focused on what's practical. So in the field of ideas, a lot of the ideas are going to be theoretical, philosophical, spiritual. But for Kshatriyas, they're just like, what's the use of that? We've got to get things done. We've got to take care of people. We've got to run things. We've got to see that, problems are solved for society. And these things are not very useful. So when you have public universities, for example, the first thing to be shut down are the departments of religion, philosophy, like that, because the government doesn't see them as very practical or useful. So huge areas of knowledge get kind of stifled. Okay, so if you have a Vaishya doing a Shudra's work, so the Vaishyas, their tendency is expand. They're business people or farmers. They're always trying to expand. They want to expand the business, open up new franchises, get more land, grow more crops, produce more and more and more. Whereas the Shudras, the artists and craftspeople, they're more simple. They produce their thing and they just want to make it quality. They take pride in their work, and they're not inclined to expand beyond just, their simple little shop or whatever that they have, their little, what do you call it? Workshop, yeah. So then a Vaishya, when they start doing Shudra's work, then they want to expand everything. They want to maximize the profits. They want to make it sustainable. And what makes things sustainable in a Vaishya's mind is profit. Right? Because if you're generating profit, that means you can keep generating profit. So then they want to see how they can mass produce things. So then you end up with industrial mass production of crafts. And you end up with, instead of just having a little woodworker there carving things in his workshop, now all of a sudden you've got like industrial produced, like carved things with machines. Instead of home cooked meals by some mom and pop cafe thing, you get fast food restaurants where you got franchises all over the world and everything is mass produced. And then so these are all should be done by people in the field of artistry, like making crafts, making food, making movies. So if someone who's actually in the field of artistry is making a movie, it's going to be quality, right? They're going to put their heart into it. They're going to make it with well-developed plots, with some nuanced themes that are relevant to the local people and the culture. But the Vaishyas, they want to take that medium and expand it and make it global, and so then you end up with these movies that are just full of sex and violence because that's what sells, and it sells globally, and you don't need to understand the language because everybody relates to those things and gets excited about them. So that's what we end up with. So it becomes kind of spoiled, and it just made cheap, mass production of things. Then if you have, I'll do a couple more. Are these interesting? It makes it a little clear. It makes it clear, right, how the nature and the values are suited to a certain type of work, and when you apply them in another field, it just kind of ruins it, right? It just sort of spoils it. Okay, so if you have a Shudra doing a Brahman's work, so it's someone in the field of artistry trying to work in the field of ideas, then what happens is, see, with the people in the field of artistry, they want to please their customers. They want to be supportive. They're concerned with what pleases and what supports, what's beautiful, what's functional. But the truth is not always pleasing. And so in the field of ideas, things need to be true. But if it's not pleasing, then they might just not say the truth, right? And then they compromise the truth, and the field of ideas just becomes corrupted, basically, or twisted. And then another thing about people in the field of artistry is that they have a great love for physical comfort, right? They're simple, but not in the way that the person in the field of ideas is simple, in terms of being detached and just being kind of like minimalistic. But they're simple in that they're easily satisfied with just kind of good food, good friends, family, comfortable house, like that kind of like basic sense gratification. That if my body is like, the needs of my body are happy, then I'm basically happy. So what happens is when they get into the field of ideas, then their love for physical comfort makes them present philosophy and religion either in a sensuous way or in a way that promotes sensuality. And that ends up just making it not very spiritual anymore, right? So, and because people in the field of artistry deal with concrete things, they deal with physical things, right? Let's say if you've got a carpenter and he's making a table, he's making a stand like this. So the stand either works or it doesn't, either stands or it doesn't, right? Either the angle is either right or it's not. The book stays or it falls off, right? So it's very black and white. Their field of work is kind of black and white. And so when they get into the field of ideas, which is not black and white at all, right? It's full of different perspectives and opinions and nuances and subtleties and cultural sensitivities and all these things, then they can't really accommodate that. Like they just can't deal with that. And so they try to make ideas just black or white. Like it's either right or it's wrong. This is what, yeah. And so they're not able to come up with an inclusive, accommodating vision for society, which is what people in the field of ideas are supposed to do. They're like the visionaries of society. So, yeah. Anyways, I'll just do one more. So if Shudras are doing Kshatriya's work, then this also becomes problematic because usually Shudras have to be governed by someone else. But if you put them in the position of government, they just don't have the mind for it. And so they're used to following rules, right? And what they'll do is they'll just focus more on rules, like the letter of the law, without understanding the spirit of the law. Or they can't distinguish between principles and details. So they just get caught up with like, this is the way it has to be done. This is what the law book says. This is what's been done before. And they're not able to innovate and understand underlying principles of what's really good and helpful and needed in society. So, yeah. And then that adherence to rules brings a lot of bureaucracy into it. It's kind of like unnecessary and stifling bureaucracy. So, yeah. And some of these things you might see, you might see in society today, that because we've got wrong people in the wrong positions, then things are not working right. And then that makes everything frustrating for everyone. Because you're trying to talk to somebody who's in government, and they're just like giving you a whole lot of paperwork. And you're like, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be an authority? Aren't you supposed to know what's good for the country? And it's just not going the way it should go. Or, yeah, any of these things that I just mentioned. So, but if everyone is doing their own work, then the values match with the needs of the career, and it just works. And even if the person doesn't have the skills to do it, but because they have the nature to do it, and because their values are aligned, then the skills is just, it's easy, right? They can quickly learn the skills. So, yeah, it's very important to understand our Varna. And some people might argue, oh, well, we're all Varna Sankara and Kali Yuga. And it's not actually true, right? We actually do have our natures, and that nature can be matched to a Varna. And everybody has one Varna. And, yeah. So, in Krishna consciousness, in ISKCON, this is important because we see that in the past a lot of devotees have left Krishna consciousness because they were forced, or at least pushed or heavily encouraged to do a service which was not suitable to their nature. And so it's not sustainable. You can do it for a short time, like an emergency situation, you can do whatever has to be done. But you can't go on doing that for decades. You can't do that for your whole life. So, yeah, these devotees, they'll leave and then they'll get a career that suits their nature. And they'll be able to do that. So we have to really help devotees to figure out what their nature is and figure out what their Varna is and where they can make a positive, balanced, and lasting contribution to society and be happy. Because if we're doing something that's not suited to us, we're not going to be happy. And then people around us aren't going to be happy. And if too many people, we got too many unhappy, frustrated, unsatisfied, drained, depressed people in the world, then it's not going to be a happy world. So, yeah, we have to figure these things out and act appropriately, even if it means we're not going to earn as much money. But what's the point of having money? People want money because they think it's going to make them happy. But if you're doing a job that you hate to get money, you're defeating the purpose, because your money's not going to make you happy if you're totally unhappy with your work. Your work is supposed to make you happy. So, yeah, we have to find out what makes us happy, and we'll be happy. Yeah. And then Krishna is saying that by doing our prescribed duty, then we don't get any sinful reactions for doing our work, even if we make some mistakes in the work, even if we do it imperfectly. We'll gradually be elevated, especially if we're doing that work for the pleasure of Krishna, right, which is the goal. We'll be elevated materially, we'll be elevated spiritually, and gradually we'll come to the transcendental platform. And then on the transcendental platform, you can do anything. But Arjuna, who is a pure devotee, Krishna is telling him to fight. You're a Kshatriya, you need to fight. So even on the transcendental platform, it's still going to work out better to act according to your nature. Even if you could do other things and still be totally enlivened, because you're enlivened not by your work but by your relationship with Krishna, still you could be doubly enlivened if you're enlivened by your relationship with Krishna, and also the service that you're doing is totally just you're doing what you're meant to be doing. So, yeah, there's some points about the importance of discharging our own duty according to our own nature, and the danger for ourselves and for society of doing the wrong thing, of working in the wrong field, doing another's duty, which Krishna says is dangerous, or it's a vehicle for fear, and it doesn't lead to liberation. It leads to degradation. Okay, so we'll leave a little bit of time here for questions. Yes?
There's a saying that sometimes instead of doing what we like, we should like what we do. So what I understand is doing what we like is called hobby, and liking what we do is called duty. So somebody might be a doctor by profession, and he might like to sing, he might like to play a flute.
Mm-hmm.
If he tries to make singing as a profession, that might be a mess.
Yeah.
So can you please explain the difference between hobby and duty? Like these days we have got a marathon for 8 hours of distribution.
Yeah.
That's a duty.
Mm-hmm.
I might like sitting in a room reading Prabhupada, so singing Vaishnava.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not doing this at this time. So where I start liking going out on books.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have very hobby.
Yeah.
Can you explain this?
Yeah. So there's your career, and then you may have some hobbies. So yeah, there are some things that we like doing just for fun, and Krishna says that he says that one should be balanced in eating, sleeping, recreation, and work. Right? So he makes a distinction between work and recreation. So your work is what we're talking about in terms of varna. That's what you do for your livelihood. Right? Then you have hobbies that you do for fun, and those hobbies can be very different from what you do from your livelihood, because you want to take a break from what you do all the time and do something different, right? To kind of like balance out your mind, basically, balance your life. So let's say, you go to work all day and do something, and then you come back and you want to relax by, playing some music or doing some embroidery or something like that. But you're not going to make a career of embroidery. You're not going to become a musician. Those are just things that you do to kind of like decompress, just like relax. So, yeah, those things are not defining your varna. Because as much as you enjoy doing them sometimes just to relax as a hobby, you probably wouldn't be happy doing it all the time. You wouldn't like it if you had to do it, right? Like, I had a friend she liked to do art. And then someone was like, oh, you're such a good artist, you should just do art, like for a living. And then when she started trying to do art for a living, she started hating art. Like, as soon as she had to think about like selling her art, it just spoiled everything. And she literally stopped doing any art for years because it just became so unpalatable, the thought of it. So, yeah, there's a difference between your hobbies and your career. So one is what you do for your livelihood, and the other is what you just kind of do for fun, that you probably wouldn't be happy doing if you had to do it. Right? Yeah. Yes?
Thank you very much. You expanded this subject. In the case of Yudhishthira Maharaj, we know animals were all Kshatriyas, correct?
Yeah.
So in the case that when what he wanted to be very truthful, and he even refused to lie during the battle, is this an example of Kshatriya trying to be a Brahmana? What is that?
Not really. It's just that Maharaj Yudhisthira, it was Krishna says better to do your duty imperfectly, right? So that was an imperfection in the execution of his duty, basically.
What, the fact that he didn't want to lie?
Yeah. Like under the circumstances, he should have, right? But yeah, he was applying the wrong. He was applying sort of Brahminical values to Kshatriya duty, which doesn't work. Yeah.
So he being a Kshatriya, he wanted to kind of do a Brahmin job.
I mean, he was fighting a battle, so it was still, he was doing he was doing the work of a Kshatriya, but yeah, just the values, like a Brahminical values influenced his mind. Krishna Baba.
Prabhupada always speaks about how as devotees we should try to come to the Brahminical satsang.
Yeah.
So does that mean that all devotees should be Brahmins?
No. I mean, there's a difference between... See, Prabhupada wanted everyone to be in the mode of goodness. Right? So generally, goodness leads to a Brahminical nature, but it doesn't necessarily lead to a Brahminical varna. Right? So let's say if you have a devotee who's a business person. So as they advance in Krishna consciousness, they're not going to be influenced so much by the modes of ignorance and mode of passion that tend to drive the businessman. But they're still going to do business, but they'll just do it for Krishna. They'll do it in a regulated way. They'll do it as a matter of duty. They'll still enjoy doing business, and they'll still try to expand their business and all that. But it'll be more pure, and it'll be Krishna conscious, right?
So my Brahminical character, not necessarily Brahminical.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why, when devotees take second initiation, sometimes we call it Brahman initiation. It doesn't mean that they became a Brahmin in Brahmin Varna, right? It just means that